So there's a lot to talk about. We'll give it a few minutes to get everyone to get settled and,
You
with your beverage of
make sure to hit
choice
that
and your
like.
snack item that you may like.
Yeah, you have a good coffee drink. Hit that like button so that
Hit the
more
like
people join
button,
us. Look,
invite your
we know
friends,
Don Lemon,
subscribe if you're
Mike
not a
Nellis
subscriber.
do the same time slot every week. We want to outrank them here on the Substack app.
Yeah, so sorry about the hour early today. I'm doing another um uh podcast at 2:30. My friend Mike Pesca, which I'll put on
Oh,
the I'll put up when
Mike's a good
it's done.
dude. Tell him I say hi.
Mike's a good dude. I like Mike a
Yeah.
lot. Uh, he lives here in Brooklyn. I'm actually going over his place tonight because I have to record something for another project I'm working on. Um, but yeah, so we have to finish up around
And
2:30. It's 2 o'clock today.
if we're talking scheduling, next week we will be on on Tuesday. Because I have to teach on Wednesday. Uh,
Oh
the
wow,
the the one holiday during academic semesters that universities abide by is Martin Luther King Day.
that
So
is
I
right.
teach on Mondays this year, and that because they have to have the same number of classes for every class day, we start the semester on a Wednesday with a Monday schedule just to confuse everyone.
That's no
So I
good.
have one Wednesday that I have to teach my class, and it's next week.
What
So
is
we'll
your
be on
what is the
Tuesday.
class you're teaching?
I teach a class on the history of modern conservatism in the GOP. And every year it gets a little bit more Trumpy. Every
Is it
year,
like history of the GOP and conservatism descent into madness?
I
That's what it
think I
should be.
call it. I went with like the history from Taft to Trump, that kind of thing. We tried to be factual, but it is a descent into madness in a lot of ways. I'm reading a book on the Trump intellectuals, like the intellectual backbone of MAGA,
That is an
and
oxymoron, I believe,
yeah,
what you just said.
it is, but these people, they're academics. They, Claremont Institute types, and some of the folks out there, Adrian Vermeulen, I think it is at Harvard, the guy who talks about like common good conservatism. Translation: it's legal for us to force what we think is the right way on you. Um, it's these people, they're out there, but it's certainly. And by the way, just slight digression, but anyone who thinks that MAGA is something wholly new, I urge you to go and watch some clips on YouTube of George Wallace,
Yeah.
because
Oh yeah.
he's basically Donald Trump doing the same shtick like 50 years earlier with slightly less varnish.
So I wrote my book on 68, which is over there, called American Maelstrom. If you haven't bought it, you should.
You should.
And thank you. And I basically deep dived on Wallace and sort of realized just how he's in some ways the most influential political figure of the last 50, 60 years in American politics, and that there's a direct line. I wrote a piece about this back in 2016. There's a direct line between him and Trump. I mean, his rhetoric,
Yeah.
this sort of conservative populism that Wallace really popularized and the GOP sort of took over, or appropriated, I should say, is really what Trump has been running on since he sort of entered politics. Thank you for that, Lynn. I
Yeah,
appreciate that.
yeah. I mean, if you look at, there's a whole movement in the 70s by conservatives who realize, they look at the Wallace vote in 68 and the Nixon vote and say, hey, we're almost 60% of the country if we confuse these things.
Yeah,
And that's what they do. They bring that together. They bring the Wallace in. And those guys were always the junior partners in the coalition until you get to MAGA. But it's there. It's always there. They're always, most of these people were not little dorky Paul Ryans, or I like to use the analogy of Alex P. Keaton, for those of you who are children of 80s television, where they're like, oh yes, less taxes, and we have to cut the tax rate on derivatives, and that
yeah.
kind of stuff. There's a lot more of these populist conservatives, and they were just looking for a champion, and Trump comes along, and it's literally, if you watch Wallace, you read anything about him, or Dan Carter has the best biography of
Dan
Wallace.
Carter's best biography of
Yeah,
Wallace.
you read that biography. I always say to my students, does that sound like anyone? And the answer is, yeah, it's Donald
Yeah.
Trump.
I mean,
You the parallels are striking.
Yeah, I literally wrote a piece, like, I think in March 2016 for Boston Globe, making this exact argument that the parallels between Wallace's rhetoric and Trump's rhetoric are remarkably similar. One thing about Wallace sort of interesting is that he was basically a New Deal Democrat.
Yeah.
I mean, economically, he supported economic redistribution. It was for white people. I mean, that was
Well,
basically what his
it,
position was.
it
And
was
by the way, that was true of all Southern Democrats. Southern
yeah.
Democrats were fine with much of the New Deal as long as it didn't mean benefits for black people,
Yeah,
by and
that's
large.
right. I mean, they wanted new, increased teacher salaries, new highways, all of these things for their constituents. The only thing with Wallace was it wasn't pure redistribution because he was on the take most of the time, and so he would like float bonds and things that were not good ways of paying for those programs because he didn't want to tax his the people lining his pockets. But realistically speaking, these people, if you there's another book by a guy named Jonathan Bartho. I'm blanking on the title. I don't see it over there. Oh yes, I do. Whistling Dixie. It's on
Oh yeah, I
Ronald
know that book.
Reagan, and there's a whole chapter on Reagan fighting against Southern conservatives in both parties over trade because these guys were also ardent protectionists because they
Yep,
had textile mills and stuff
yep.
in their districts and states. So the root of Trump is Southern conservative Southern Democrats, the Dixiecrats, what as they
Well,
were known to some
yeah.
extent,
The
with
the
the New York
difference is
gloss.
the difference is that when Trump became president, he basically adopted the economic policies of the sort of
Trump.
the right wing of the conservative movement, the
Yeah,
modern conservative movement. I
yeah.
mean, the modern conservative movement before Trump was basically what they did. Their whole mission was to cut taxes for rich people, to cut government, which a lot of Republicans actually did not support, even though they said they did. But in reality, they didn't support it because it meant it hurt them.
It was
And
unpopular.
right, and they used appeals to racism, cultural conservatism, wedge issues, these kinds of, dog whistle like politics to win the support of Republican voters for policies that frankly harmed them.
Yeah,
People like Paul Ryan, people like even Mitt Romney, these guys ran on social conservatism, but when they became, or that's what I should say, cultural conservatism, when they got into power, they governed like economic conservatives. And one of the things that Trump did in 2016 that made him different and I think allowed him the nomination was he ran against that. He ran against the Paul Ryans and he ran against, the neocons and the neocon foreign policy of the Bush era. He ran against cutting Medicare and Medicaid and cutting Social Security. Ironically enough, of course, one thing he's done this term is he's cut Medicaid, which is deeply unpopular, and I think has fed his unpopularity. One thing I'll say about Trump is that he would be a lot more popular if he had stuck with the sort of economic
yeah,
populism that he ran on, as opposed to adopting the policies of. I mean, I don't think he'd be that much more popular. I mean, he's still a crazy person, which is a problem with him. But I do think that you know that was a political error on his part just to follow the lead of Republicans when it came to economic policy and
I,
domestic policy in general.
I could not agree more. I actually, I think that there was an opportunity out there. If Donald Trump had been the president that he was the candidate. That's an awkward way of phrasing it. But if he had stuck to what he said he was, or what I call Josh Hawley conservatism, because Hawley's the one guy trying to
Yeah.
put economic bones on this policy. He said his proposal now is to deduct up to $25,000 in healthcare costs, which would save a lot of Americans a lot of money. Um, and Trump just doesn't care about policy. So he's allowed the John Thunes and the Mike Johnsons of the world, who are classic Reagan conservatives, to set the policy agenda, and all he cares about is wins, quote unquote. Did they pass my bill? But the stuff that they're doing that is politically unpopular is stuff that he doesn't really support. He didn't support cutting Medicaid. I mean, even yesterday, Michael, he meets with the House Republicans at his newly named Trump Kennedy Center. Um, and he says to them, you guys have to be flexible and hide. And all they could do, one guy
The
leaked
Hyde
to a
Amendment.
reporter, Hyde
Just
Amendment.
clarify what the Hyde Amendment is.
Hyde Amendment says that you can't use federal funds to pay for abortion. So Medicaid can't provide abortions. It goes Henry Hyde, the congressman from Illinois, is the one who was named after. It goes back to the 70s. And one of the Republicans leaked, I almost fell out of my seat. Like they leaked all this negative stuff when Trump's saying it. It's like, no, he actually gets the politics that, the anti-abortion stuff is bad for them.
Yeah.
And he doesn't support half of what they're doing, but he doesn't seem to understand that the way to get around that is all he's got to do is go out there and say publicly, I support, a deal to extend the ACA subsidies, and don't let abortion get in the way, and it would force them to put it up for a vote or demand a vote on
Yeah.
something. Instead, they're going to cling to this, well, we need 35 Republicans in the Senate thing, and they're not going to get it because a lot of these congressmen are still Reagan conservatives and
Yeah.
senators. Most of them haven't shifted. And I remember going back, had Kristen Soltis Anderson come into my class like 10 years ago. And she did one of those four quadrant grid things: social conservatives, economic conservatives, liberals. And she said, everybody on college campuses thinks that like the libertarians, that like there's a lot of them. The people were like, oh, yeah, we're pro LGBTQ marriage, but we're also like, low taxes types. It's just actually, there's like nobody in that quadrant. The quadrant where there's a lot of people, where there's an opportunity, is the social conservative economic liberal quadrant. And this was
Yeah.
pre-Trump. And it's
Yeah.
proven to be correct. Like there's a real opportunity out there for the GOP if they ever actually adapt their economic agenda away from Reaganism and go towards real populism.
But they won't,
They
because
won't.
the root of the party, and we saw this with Trump. Trump, basically was saying the quiet part loud, which was basically the racial appeals, the cultural appeals, the cultural conservatism, the misogyny, all the things that we hate about Trump, you and I hate about Trump, and Democrats hate about Trump, are the things that, like, appeals to sort of the high-minded, fever swamp, presiding conservative, not fever even swampy, just these are the things that the extreme Republicans really they find appealing. I always make this point that if you go back to like 2016, you look at where his support came from in the Republican Party. A lot of really reasons why he won the nomination was he was getting support um, from moderates and from secular Republican voters,
Mhm.
and the moderate thing it's kind of related, because what a lot of the support came from was Republicans who were not religious, who weren't so on board with the abortion stuff, or some of the other
There's
cultural
actually
conservative stuff.
there
But
there's
we're yeah.
political science research on that. Michelle Margolis did a study
Yeah,
that showed
I
that
know
he
that. Yeah,
did better with the less religious
yeah,
Republicans in the primary in 2016. And then I believe, if I remember correctly, it was the religious ones who like were the hardest core supporters in the general. But they didn't want him. And then they got him
yeah.
and said, well, he's still better than Hillary.
Well, that's the thing interesting about no, it's exactly right. The evangelicals are like among Trump's strongest supporters, which makes no sense at all, except that even the evangelical movement is at its core not a religious movement, but a political movement, and evangelicals are incredibly partisan, and so they hate Democrats and they hate liberals. So that's why they were not supportive of him. Remember, in Iowa, he lost the Iowa primary caucus, which was, of course, dominated by social conservatives. So I think I think Cruz won, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
So just to say the point, like, that was the root of his appeal. And, he has abandoned that to a large extent. Well, not abandoned it. I mean, he's doubled down on the, the racism and the misogyny and the, like, sort of schoolyard style, like, conservatism that you see sort of in the Pete Hegseths of the world, and, you know, America fuck the world kind of stuff that you're seeing now with this Venezuela thing.
Well,
And, and,
the
and
guy
that's
is,
where yeah,
the guy who's been out there the last couple of days, who's the paradigm. This is Stephen Miller, who is insane and
can
a
I just say, wait,
literal.
no, he really is. Like, I watched him on Jake Tapper. He was interviewed by Jake Tapper the other day. He is a lunatic. And I'm not like saying this to be in a pejorative way. He is literally a lunatic. He is insane. Like, first of all, he cannot modulate his behavior. He gets so amped up talking about this stuff in a way that is just like almost disturbing. It's almost like he's having kind of like an out of body experience. Like, he just cannot control his impulses. He just goes completely nuts. And the things he says are insane. This says me, by the way, just for the record here. that this White House allows this lunatic sociopath on TV on a regular basis, no less, so close to the seat of government, is just insane. He's the most off-putting human being I've ever seen. I think I've ever seen in politics. I'm not
I
exaggerating. He is so off-putting.
The only thing that surprises me is that somehow he found someone to marry him because that dude needs to switch to decaf, and that's probably not enough.
The fact
Um,
that he has a
and
wife just speaks of the
and
enduring
actually,
generosity of
look,
women. I honestly,
she's pretty nuts too because she was touting Jenny McCarthy's views on vaccine
no,
yesterday,
she's
but
nuts because she married Stephen Miller and then she had his children. I mean, that's what makes her nuts.
I mean, this guy, you're just like, what's
Shonda for
wrong
the
with you,
Goyim. That's all I
dude?
can say. It's just awful. He's the most
It's
awful person.
just so he's such a bad human being. And
Okay,
like
I guess, Lynn.
you're just like, what were you just that unpopular as a kid that you have to revolt against all the values that
I do
surrounded you,
I,
or
I do
what?
feel like half these guys are like acting out all their childhood trauma. And like if these guys just gotten laid in high school, they might be such better people, honestly.
Well, I mean, I think that goes for him. It goes for Hegseth. Like,
No, actually, I think he said that no problem getting laid. I think that's his problem, actually. But no, I love
well,
something about Hegseth that the scandal about him committing sexual assault on that woman, his defense was, no, I was cheating on my wife who just had my baby. That's what
Well,
happened.
but this is the thing about the social conservatism is all a freaking farce. I
Yeah.
mean, they're a bunch of hypocrites who do whatever they want and then preach piety. Heggs is leading like prayer services at the Pentagon, and he's a fraud in
Yeah.
every way, shape, and form. I mean, this is something we stopped talking about after like last winter, but it's worth reminding people this is the worst cabinet in modern history by miles. I mean,
It's not
RFK
even
is
close.
dangerous and incompetent. Hegseth is dangerous and incompetent. The most competent people spend most of their time kissing Trump's ass. You
I mean,
know,
I reached the point where I longed for the days when Steve Mnuchin was the Treasury Secretary. At least he was semi competent. All right, look, let's talk about um what's going on in the news. Look about Venezuela first. Let me just say for the record, I apologize for my language here. This is the most fucked up military operation I think I've ever seen in my entire life. It's been 5 days, 4 days. I don't know how it's been. Yeah, Monday, Tuesday, 4 days. I have no idea why we did this. I really don't. I do not understand what the motivation was. I don't understand what the long term goal was. I don't understand what our goals are for Venezuela. The administration has just been all over the map. By the way, just wanted to this point. I read Mike Waltz. I'm writing a piece about this. I read Mike Waltz's statement at the UN Security Council about this, which, by the way, focused somewhat on the drug side, but then focused a great deal on like China and Iran and Hezbollah and having influence in Venezuela. But he actually said that Venezuelan immigrants who have found refuge in America are celebrating Maduro's um, uh, departure. Is he aware that this administration has revoked the status of 600,000 Venezuelans who are here and trying to deport them back to Venezuela? I mean, he literally was like, "Isn't it great that people can come to America and Venezuela and live in freedom?" Meanwhile, this administration is trying to send them back to Venezuela.
and we have to add the kicker to that, which is Homeland Security being like now they can go back to their country that they love so much. The other day, like I don't know if it was Noam or it was one of her minions, but saying that like they can't even come up with a message on this because they have no idea what their
So this
vision
is the
is.
problem. They don't. So okay. So there's a couple things to unpack here. What was the motivation for Trump to do this? I am convinced it was because he wanted the spectacle of getting Maduro, bringing him to the U.S. It makes him look strong, he thinks, and powerful. Blah blah blah. I don't think that he would had to be talked into this. I think by Rubio, whose goal here seems to be regime change in Cuba. Although how that works, I'm not really clear. If he thinks he's going to convince Trump to invade Cuba, I'm suspicious of that. If he thinks Cuba's going to fall apart on its own, maybe, but that would just lead to mass migration to the to the U.S., which nobody wants. Apparently, at least in his administration. So I don't
Well, I was
get it.
gonna say I would like it. I would like some more Cuban restaurants. So I
Yeah, that's
mean,
true. That's true. So you've had like the drug side of it is one argument, right? This was a law enforcement exercise. You've had the we want to blunt Chinese influence in the region, which that just for the record, I think that anything this may increase China's influence in the region because all these South American countries are going to say, "Boy, we can't trust the U.S. anymore. Let's like, or the U.S. is an undependable partner. Let's maybe make let's cover our asses and make some more deals with the Chinese." Um, there's arguments about Russian influence, Iranian influence, which doesn't make really much sense to me either. Um, I just don't get it. I don't know why we did it, and I don't know what our plans are. And I saw yesterday that Trump bragged about that the Venezuelans apparently are turning over 30 to 50 million barrels of oil, which may or may not be true. That is literally a day and a half. No, I'm sorry, it's 2 days of U.S. Oil supply. We go through about 20 million barrels a day in the U.S. So it's 2 days of oil. It's a drop in the bucket. So I don't know if this is about oil, but even if it was about oil, it doesn't make any sense because actually oil companies don't want to go into Venezuela right now. They don't want to increase production because there already is too much oil out there, and which has led to prices going down. More production in Venezuela will lead prices going down even further. Commenter Barb says, is it creating spheres of influence? Yes, that's definitely part of it as well, I think, from Trump's perspective. But if you wanted to do that, you'd think you would actually invade the country rather than just replace Maduro, right? All we've done is create a power vacuum in Venezuela, instability in Venezuela, with no long-term solution. I will say this much: this is definitely not about democracy because these guys don't shit about democracy, and they were basically were more than happy to see Maduro's VP replace him, who was
And
won election legitimately as Maduro did.
well, 2 points. The first is what Michael is really saying to you is you could do a we didn't start the fire verse of their different rationales over the last 4 days for this police action. I'm not going to call it a war because it's not
It's
at
not a
this
war.
moment. But like the one real point of departure is that I don't know if you saw the press conference. I think it was Carlos Jimenez, the representative from South Florida, got real mad at someone implying that the opposition leader was not going to become the new leader in Venezuela. Because the South Florida Republicans who actually represent Venezuelans understand that just handing the ball to his vice president does pretty much nothing. And now there's some talk that they're going to go after the interior minister next because that person is like in charge of their secret, gangs and whatnot. Um, but it really is unfocused. And the fact, and then to make matters weirder, you have the Cuba stuff, and then Trump decided to bring the Greenland stuff back for the first time in like a year, where all of a sudden he's going to talk about taking Greenland and had his press secretary go out there and not rule out military action, which is the first time I actually heard pushback from the Republican leadership on the Hill about anything, where even Mike Johnson was like, that might be ill-advised.
Let
Like
me
I
say, yeah,
just
on the Greenland thing, I wrote a piece in 2019 for the Globe about how this was going to become the new Republican mantra. They want to make Greenland's 51st state. Uh,
I mean,
and I
I'll
was kind of,
take it, Michael. That's two more Democratic senators.
I wrote, I know, right? I wrote it sort of jokingly at the time, but clearly, like, that's what's happening. And let me say something in Greenland. We are not going to invade Greenland. Okay, we're not. It's not going to happen. First of all, I am not. Let me rephrase that. I genuinely do not think that if Trump ordered an invasion of Greenland, the U.S. military would carry it out. I really am. I shouldn't say I'm not. I don't think so.
Well,
I should say I'm not sure they would, because I don't know there's any legal rationale for doing so. And to go to war against a NATO ally would be, I think, would create a lot of, let's say, agita inside the Pentagon.
with one caveat, I saw a quote from a Danish official this morning saying that they need about 5 helicopters to conquer Greenland, so it
Just
wouldn't take
nonetheless,
much. Um,
nonetheless, I don't think it's going to
but
happen.
but I don't think it's gonna happen. Oh, and just to make you angrier about this, um, apparently Speaker Johnson told Lisa Desjardins from PBS News that they don't need congressional approval to use military force in Greenland. At which point, what is the point of Congress at that moment? Like, I have never seen a congressional leader destroy the institutional power of Congress like this guy. He is just the biggest asswipe on the planet Earth.
It's ridiculous. But on the Greenland thing, they're trying to pressure the Danes into selling Greenland.
Right.
The Danes aren't going to sell Greenland. They're just not going to do it. There's no reason for them to do it. It would not be worth it to them to do it. And frankly, if I'm the Danes, I'm just going to basically, batten down the hatches and wait this thing out for the next 3 years until he's out of power. I mean, this is a
Not
ridiculous.
even
And by the
3
way,
years, just a year. Get to a year in a Democratic Congress, and he's going to be severely limited on that front, I think.
maybe.
Maybe.
Here's the thing, and this is what's a really the engage. And let's get to the politics. This is a podcast about politics, or a Substack live about politics. Who wants this? Who is like? This is the two thing that gets me more than anything else about the Venezuela thing and the Greenland thing. Trump goes out there on Saturday and says, we're going to run Venezuela. What a stupid, forgive my language, fucking thing to say. Nobody in this country wants America to run Venezuela. Nobody. Okay. And that kind of language is the kind of language that just, I think, ends up pissing off the MAGA base, but also is ammunition for Democrats to say, this guy wants to run Venezuela, but he can't even run the economy in the US. And then on the Greenland thing, there is not a single constituency anywhere in this country to see, maybe I shouldn't say any constituency, maybe like 10%,
Look,
who want
Stephen
to take
Miller's
over Greenland.
household is his constituency.
Maybe that's his constituency. But like, this is not a popular thing. And I'm struck by all of these pundit bros who are like, Democrats need to talk about issues that people care about. What about this president? He talks. No, they didn't run. Nobody didn't run on this. This isn't as agenda as it's popular. Nobody wants this. And I mean, to me, the politics of this are what's important. And they just speak to how out of touch this president is and how much he is leading his party down the primrose path toward political disaster in November.
Yeah.
Look,
Yeah,
there's no benefit for this politically in Venezuela. Zero political benefit.
I disagree ever so slightly, but only ever
Okay.
so slightly.
All right.
I think there's a benefit in the state of Florida. I think in the other 49 states there is zero benefit. And if anything, first of all, you're 100% right about the running Venezuela thing. I mean, Josh Shapiro had a good attack on this,
He did.
and
He did.
previewed what Democrats are going to come up with for the midterms, which is you're struggling and he's interested in running Venezuela. Like he's paying no attention. He doesn't care about your plight. It's a gift to Democrats. That's
Yeah,
the first
I
piece.
agree. I agree.
Um, and the second thing is, if he actually tries to run Venezuela, I urge him to Google Bush, comma George W. to see how well this goes for the United States. I mean, the first time you land U.S. Marines and they get attacked in Caracas, the popularity is going to go from 37% where it was for this invasion or whatever we want to call it to like 2%. And I do think that where I think that this hurts him really severely is there is that weird segment of MAGA. I don't even, it's not all of MAGA, but it's the same group of people who I think are upset about the Epstein files, who really believed, and a lot of it is like young men. There was new polling that Peter Hamby had in Puck last night on young men,
Yeah.
and that they are really, really, really non-interventionist. There's a segment of the MAGA base that is basically isolationist in a lot of ways. You can call them the Tulsi Gabbard MAGA people. Notice you haven't seen her anywhere in all this
Yeah.
because she's an isolationist. And those people, it's another sort of subset of MAGA that voted for Trump because they thought he was different, whether it was Epstein, whether it was this. And they're just becoming disillusioned. And I don't think it matters in any sort of broad scale way. But what I said to my subscribers on Saturday about this is the problem in a midterm that president's parties have is turning people out. Okay. The people who are angry are willing to do anything to vote and they show up in droves. The people who supported you tend to be like, he's not on the ballot. He hasn't delivered. Those kinds of things. If you lose a couple of percent of MAGA over this, you
I know.
know,
I get. Yeah. Go ahead.
it's just another thing. You start adding those 2% here, 2% there, and that's how you get from a 20 seat wave to a 30 seat wave or something
Okay.
like that.
I got to mention something. So Harry Enton does polling at CNN. I like
Oh
Harry.
God.
Okay, hold on, hold on.
He is so annoying.
He and I were kind of friendly back. He used to be at the. I used to write for the Guardian. He used to be at the Guardian. We were friends. We used to talk, exchange emails and so forth. I haven't talked to him in a couple of years, so I like him. Having said that, he does the most brain dead polling analysis on CNN. It's embarrassing how bad it is. He had one yesterday. This is why I brought this up. That said, oh, Trump's support with Republicans is at 85%, same as it was 6 months ago. And it's sort of his point was like Trump is just as popular as ever been with MAGA, with Republicans, and he's not losing support. Guess what? 85% among Republicans for a Republican president is actually not good. It's actually kind of bad. You need to be above 90%, especially when you're going into a midterm election in which you are favored to lose seats. And by the way, that's one poll. I looked at the YouGov poll, which came out the same day as that he was referring to a Reuters poll, had Trump at 81% among Republicans, 17% disapproval. Guess what? That's a bad number. You want to be above 90%. I guarantee you, I haven't looked at the numbers in a while. He was at 90, probably 95% among Republican voters in 2024. If he's at 85, he has lost ground with at least some segment of Republican voters. And when you consider that, first of all, he's among Democrats, he's probably like 4 or 5%, and he's getting killed among independents, that's a problem. So, Harry, do better. Because
I
sorry, go ahead. Go ahead.
You're gonna tee me up because I have a real issue with the Harry Enton, Nate Silver class of pundits who are these data guys who never worked in politics, they never studied politics, and they trot them out there to try to analyze these polling numbers because they think that they can hit the like Steve Karnacki magic of like, oh, this guy's going to become a phenomenon thing. And I have nothing against Harry Anton. I don't know him, but it's just like it confirms everything bad about the media. That the media is focused solely on the horse race. I mean, CNN is even worse because they're now doing these stupid segments on the prediction markets, which provide their audience with absolutely zero knowledge. The prediction markets are not based on data. They're not based on reporting. They're not based on anything other than vibes. Okay? And this is what CNN is doing. And it's just like horse racism to the worst
I
degree.
actually am going to push back. I think the prediction markets are actually sort of interesting. Um, I was subscribed to the
This is
view.
why you
James,
tune into this show because you never know
gender
what
disagreement.
disagreement you might get.
James Surowiecki has a great book came out a bunch of years ago called "The Wisdom of Crowds," which is really smart. One of the examples he uses in the book is like this is before sort of the data revolution in football. He'd say like whenever the crowd is like cheering for you to go for it on fourth down, the crowd actually is generally correct. The wisdom of crowd, like they generally have a better sense of this than the actual coach does. They're actually onto something, and there is some wisdom to be drawn from these prediction markets and what they tell us about how a bunch of people are sort of, what their take is on a particular election. I mean, I remember back in 2024, the prediction markets basically had Trump winning, and I was like, that seems wrong to me. I think, the evidence seemed to favor Harris, but those markets were basically correct. So I'm not going to, we're not talking about prediction markets, but I do think they do have actually some usefulness. I mean, to a degree. But to your point about the polling, like, there are good pollsters on TV. Well, not me on TV, but there are good pollsters in the media. I don't understand what Harry N is doing. Like like first of all, like polling 101 and only analysis 101, you don't rely on one poll. That's the first thing you do, right? So to rely on one poll to tell you like what Trump supports among Republicans is actually not useful in the slightest because it could be an outlier. You don't know. And as I said, I had a YouGov poll I looked up was 81%, which is a 4-point difference. But actually, 81% among Republicans is a low number for an incumbent president. It's a bad number. And so, you know, look, I think he's just doing this for clicks. I have to say this, and I like Harry, but I think he's doing this for clicks, and I think it's unfortunate because I think that this could be a better, more useful way to educate the public. But the point I'm getting at here is that if you're at 85% with Republicans 9 months out or 11 months out to election, it's not a great sign. And especially when you were doing so poorly among independents, which Trump is. So I do think that there's a larger problem here for Republicans, which is that they are losing the support of their key constituents. And by the way, one more point about this: Trump's won in 2024 and 2016 because he brought out these Trump-only voters, these occasional voters who do not vote for other Republicans just over Trump. But I would make this point. I think it's really important to me. It's a point to make that in the 2024 election, in 4 states that Trump won, Republican standing candidates lost: Arizona, Nevada, Wisconsin, and Michigan. Okay. And what does that tell me? That there is a small segment of Trump voters who are only Trump voters and will not vote for other Republicans. And if you don't get them to turn out, and we see it, by the way, over and over again. We saw it in 2018. We saw it in 2022. We've seen it in special elections. Those voters who are Trump-only voters do not turn out. And if they don't turn out in 2026, and there's no reason to think they will, that's a real problem for Republicans. It's an even bigger problem, by the way, in 2028 when Trump will not be on the ticket again.
We just got a poll today from Western North Carolina, a Trump district. Jamie Alger, I think is the name of the Democratic candidate. He's a farmer, local guy, um, showing him, and it was one of those informed ballot things. And the point of this release was to show that he was up 7 points on the informed ballot. But to me, the takeaway was before the informed ballot, he was up by 1 point. And what I think I'll lay a marker down. What I think we are going to see over the next 5 to 6 months, and then beyond, is a widening of the playing field in our in the map. Jonathan Nez in Arizona, that race is going to become competitive. He's the Democrat. Eli Crane is the incumbent Republican. There's a guy who just got in. Freudian slip. He's a fire jumper. In Montana, just
Interesting.
got in against Ryan Zinke in a district that I think could be competitive. You're going to start to see races no one's talking about right now become competitive because the MAGA voters are not going to show up. And as Michael's saying, again, 20% stays home. The 20% that's dissatisfied, that is going to tip a whole lot of seats.
Yes. Yes, it
Um,
will. Yes, it will.
that's really the simple way of phrasing it. And the thing is, I think things are only going to get worse. Something that apparently, I don't know why exactly it's making the rounds this moment, but Heather Long I think she's still at the Post.
To the Post.
No, she's at Navy Federal now, apparently. Chief
Navy
economist at Navy
Federal. What is
Federal.
that? Heather
I
Long?
don't know. Yes, I'm
By the
just
way,
looking at her
she
Twitter
was
bio.
speaking of Guardian binder, she was one of my editors at the Guardian. I always like Heather. She's good.
Well, she is now the chief economist at the Navy Federal Credit Union. But she
Really?
tweeted this morning that here's the key data. Hiring. Hiring was anemic in November. The 3.2% hiring rate was one of the worst since
I
the
saw
Great
that.
Recession
Yes.
era. The economy is just going to keep getting worse,
Yes.
okay? And things are not going to get better for Trump. And I know there's been some wag the dog discussion over the last couple of days that Trump is trying to distract from things. I don't think it's that. I think it's that he, like every other second term president, is like, oh, foreign policy, I have more freedom to do whatever I want. And he's enjoying the power that comes with it.
So here's the other
But
thing. Okay, sorry, I'm gonna cut you off. Go ahead. Sorry,
no,
I've
I
been
was just gonna
upbraided
say,
previously for interrupting you. So I don't want to do it again.
I I'm just gonna finish it and say
Well, no, no,
I
stop. No, no,
it makes him
no.
look.
Sorry, I'm being a dick now.
It's basically that it just makes him look like he's that much more out of touch, right? Like he's
Agreed.
focused on Caracas and people can't get jobs or they can't get good jobs or they're struggling to put food on the table. And he just looks like he's completely out of
Trump
touch.
is focused on Caracas. Democrats are focused on the corner store. Booyah!
Right. That's
There's
the
some
message.
campaign rhetoric for you.
That's the message. That is the entire campaign boiled down. That's what Democrats should be saying. That's why, by the way, if you want to look at one person who Democrats should not be listening to, the guy is Chris Murphy, the senator from Connecticut who wants to shut the government down again over Venezuela. And
Stop
I
it.
mean, eh, these people don't seem to understand. Focus on the economy. That
Wait.
is what people care about.
I got a better one. Trump is focused on Greenland. Democrats are focused on grocery prices. Mm. Good
It's
stuff, right?
pithy.
It's pithy.
It's pithy. But look, all I want, you know what the Democratic platform should be on Greenland? We'll take Greenland as a state. We're playing the Michael playbook. You put this out there. Two more Democratic
Two more
senators.
Democratic seats. Absolutely. Democrats should be supporting it. No doubt about it. So it's just I want to a couple things really quickly here. Somebody mentioned in the comments about the prediction markets, this Maduro thing. Someone made $400,000 betting on Maduro leaving. I mean,
Oh,
being deposed. Which, by the way, clearly was somebody who had inside information. But these things are not regulated. I mean, you can do stuff like that. It's terrible. But
well, my friend Caitlin Legacki, who's working for Haley Stevens in Michigan, was saying that like she could you put a relatively small bet down and could flip the prediction markets. And it's a real
yeah,
problem that they're using
yeah.
this as sort of like an analysis point because especially on congressional races there isn't that much money flowing and you could easily tip things and you could have people kind of monkeying with the numbers to monkey with the analysis. So it's yet another issue with these the prediction markets. I don't pay any attention to them. I tend to think that look, I just think we're turning it into sports and there's no need. We have actual information. There are people out there doing reporting on races, and
I
that
know, but
tends to be,
but
you
reporting
know,
is look. I'm just saying that you're right. People doing reporting, but that's based on talking to a few insiders. And when you have prediction markets, you are dealing with again a wisdom of crowd situation, and I do think there is some benefit to it. I mean, I check prediction markets often when I'm looking at election results to see what I think is going to happen, and they are often very accurate. So I do kind of look at them with some degree of I think they have a useful to play. Let's talk about an important development that happened this week on the race for the Senate in Alaska. It looks
just
like
to
Mary.
interrupt you before we get there, just so people know, breaking news: ICE has shot a U.S. citizen in Minnesota. And so in Minneapolis, so that may end up being a very big story because the Minnesota senators are already really on this story, and we've got some witness reports. So out of control ICE is another big issue with the Trump administration.
Yeah, and I think it's a political problem. We could talk about Tim Walz in Minnesota. Actually, let's do since you mentioned Minnesota, let's mention
Minnesota
Tim
might as well.
Walz. Tim Walz announcing this week he's not going to seek reelection, um, largely because of the continuing coverage of this daycare fraud scandal, in which something like $9 billion were stolen from COVID era funds, mainly through these sort of fraudulent daycares. Um, Let me say for the record, Tim Walz seems like a nice guy. I have no issue with him. Progressive governor, did a lot of good things in Minnesota, but you were a liability and you needed to go. And I wrote a piece about this earlier in the week, and so those of you might have read it. My take on this is pretty simple. There's no sentimentality in politics. Back in 2024, I thought even after Biden's bad performance that he was still the better bet to win versus Kamala Harris because I thought Kamala Harris had a lot of political problems, which turned out to be not really an accurate view. Although I was wrong about Biden clearly. But that was my initial take on it. But as time went on, it became clear that he'd lost support of the party, and the issue about his age was going to become a recurrent issue throughout the campaign. And I concluded he needs to go. And basically my point about this was like, I had a view one day, but that changed. And that's not because what I think about Joe Biden. I kind of like Joe Biden, but at the end of the day, he's a means to an end. He's a politician. And the mistake that people make, I think, sometimes in politics is having sentimental views toward politicians. No, they're a means to an end. And the goal for Democrats is to win elections. And if a Democrat is a problem for them, then put somebody else in their place. Al Franken's a good example of this. Al Franken, was accused of numerous I guess, sexual improprieties, not so much assault, but harassment and inappropriate behavior. He's a good senator, seemed like a nice guy. I mean, I was like Al Franken, but he was a liability. And so he has to go. And you replace him with Tina Smith, who, she's fine. She's a solid Democratic vote, just as Franken was. At the end of the day, that's all that really matters. And so my view of this is like with Walz, I'm sure he was a good guy. He maybe would have won re-election, but he was a liability for the rest of the Democratic ticket in Minnesota. And you don't need that problem. So just dump him and find somebody else who's better. As a
Yeah,
Democratic state, Klobuchar probably is going to run for the seat. She'll probably win easily.
I actually think she won't. Um,
Oh, you think she won't win or she won't win easily?
I think she won't run. To be
Oh,
clear, she's first or second in seniority on three major Senate committees. I think she'd be like fifth once Durbin retires. She'd have this fifth most seniority of any Democrat. She's going to write
hmm.
the next farm bill. I just wonder if she says, "Hey, I'm at the pinnacle of my power." She's at the top of the Commerce Committee. hierarchy as well. Well, that AI is going to, I think, run through commerce. And so I think
Yeah,
she's
but
going
she
to
wants
have,
to be president. She wants to run for president, and I think governor's a better perch to do that from than senator.
if that's her goal, then yes. If the goal is she's not that young at this point, I'll Google and figure
I
out
bet
what.
she's 61. I, I have no idea. I'm just making. I'm speculating.
She's 65 already.
Ooh, she's 65. Really?
Yeah, Klobuchar is
Wow.
65. So if she cares more about influence long term, and not being present, and personally, I would really like to nominate someone under the age of 60, for president the next
Who
time around.
cares? She's
But
popular. It's a governorship, so
right,
she's
right, look,
popular.
that was my first choice in 2020. Okay,
Really?
but
She,
yeah, oh yeah,
I don't like Amy Klobuchar.
I,
And nothing
but
to do with politics, but she's a bully. She treats her staff like shit, and I don't respect that.
I,
She
I, I,
the abuse
I
stuff
don't.
drove me crazy.
I don't like that stuff, but my attitude was that she was the most electable of the moderates at the time because I thought Biden was too old. And I say that as someone who loves Joe Biden more than any other politician because I've met him a couple of times, liked the man, taught one of his granddaughters, like great guy. But so I'm not sure she runs. It depends. Michael's right. It depends on what her goal is. But if she runs, she's going to blow out the field. She'll appoint a new senator,
Yeah.
who will be up in 2028. But I think this is right. The quote I always come back to, or story I always come back to on this, and this is from a guy named Jeff Service's book on moderate
Oh yeah, I know
Republicans.
Jeff.
Jeff's a good guy.
Good guy.
Don Rumsfeld and Allard Lowenstein, who was a liberal from Long
Oh yeah.
Island, were best friends in Congress. And the Republicans were going after Lowenstein, calling him a communist and all this. And Rumsfeld said that's not true and stuck up for him. The local GOP out on Long Island went to the Nixon White House and said, "You recant this and you endorse his opponent." And Rumsfeld did it. And they asked him, does this bother you? That was your best friend. It shattered the relationship. And he said, well, that's politics. There's
He's
no
right.
room for sentimentality in politics. It's about winning. It's about getting elected. If somebody comes a liability. Now, there's a crucial caveat to this, which is Henry Cuellar down in South Texas. If that's the only guy who can win a seat, then the bar for casting him aside is much different.
No, no, no.
You
This
know,
is yeah, yeah. Of course, this is the point. Like
yeah,
he's in only player can win that seat, but in Minnesota, it's a blue state.
exactly. Yep,
Like
that's where I was
I,
going with it.
I know with Al Franken's, he might have been a good senator, but you know what? It's a blue state, and he's a liability for the rest of the party. So dump his ass and bring in Tina Smith.
That's
She's
exactly
fine.
right. If
It-
somebody, the people who get extra running room are those in swing districts, swing states
yes,
who are uniquely popular. Everybody
yes.
else, you just cut your losses as soon as you can, because it's just better that way.
Like my take with Biden was that Biden had liabilities, but at the same time, was somebody who sorry he was somebody who I thought had a better chance to win even after the debate. I was wrong about that clearly, but it had nothing to do with any particular sentimental view toward Biden at all. And in fact, I got a lot when I wrote. I remember I wrote the piece saying everyone should just shut it the fuck up and stop complaining about it and Biden's your guy and Harris is unproven, and we shouldn't do that. It would be a mistake to nominate her or to go with her. And I think it was like a week or two later, I was like, no, I'm wrong. Actually, actually, Harris is the better way to go. And people got pissed at me about it, but I was like, look, I'm sorry. Like, this is I'm not sentimental about this at all. You know, it's a means to an end. It was about beating Trump. And at the end of the day, I mean, I think Harris was probably, well, it's hard to say. I mean, she was probably a better bet to beat Trump, but I do think she was
I
tarnished by
mean,
the fact that
I
she
wrote
was
a
a woman. So I
column.
think that hurt her.
I wrote a column and I couldn't find the place for it in like 2023 saying, "Hey, we should stick with Biden because Harris is going to be hard to beat if you have a primary and she's not a good candidate, and vice presidents tend not to be good candidates, and they're definitely better than either of them candidates, but you're not going to get them through a primary. You're not going to get them as the nominee." Um, Biden's debate performance made him a liability, and it was wise that he stepped aside. But I don't think Harris was anything special. I think Michael's right that being a woman, I think being a Californian hurt her. I think being a black woman hurt her.
Look, it's I
And
go back and forth on this. She overperformed the swing states, which says something about her political skills, political acumen. Um, but I think for reasons that are outside of her control, where she's from and her gender, I think it hurt her.
by the way, Kamala, don't run again.
Yeah, don't
That
run again.
there are a lot of better candidates out there for 2028. Although Rahm Emanuel, please stop thinking you can be president. It's the
Yeah,
most delusional thing out there.
it's not going to happen.
Michael and I have the same chance of being president as you.
Basically,
Um,
basically.
we
No, no,
want to talk about
Rahm
the
Emanuel,
Senate?
you're not. Yeah, I'll talk about the Senate. So,
Eh,
as I mentioned earlier, Mary Patola, who won a House seat in 2022, I believe it was, or 2022, I think it was. I don't remember, one of those two.
She won a special election in 22 and then got reelected in 22.
That's right. That's right. Uh, she is uh, she is up for she got lost in 24, and she was being lobbied by both Democratic Gubernatorial
Uh,
Association and Mary
I'm
Garza Association. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm cracking up because our dear leader has issued a new edict. For a very long time, buying and owning a home was considered the pinnacle of the American dream. It was the reward for working hard and doing the right thing. But now, because of record high inflation caused by Joe Biden and the Democrats, the American dream is increasingly out of reach for far too many people, especially younger Americans. It's for that reason and much more that I'm immediately taking steps to ban large institutional investors from buying more single family homes, and I will be calling on Congress to codify it. People live in homes, not corporations. I will discuss this topic, including further housing and affordability proposals, and this is the reason that I'm cracking up, and more at my speech in Davos in 2 weeks. It's like a parody. I can't help it. I'm cracking up.
Oh, that is so good.
like
I'm gonna talk about
affordability in
purchasing for
Davos.
Americans at fucking Davos.
I'm just like,
Oh my god.
does he have no one who can teach?
Oh my god. No, he doesn't have anyone who can tell him that he shouldn't do this. God, what a schmuck.
My
Okay, wait. All right, that's good stuff. Thank you for interjecting with that. Okay, so back to Patola in Alaska. She has been lobbied to run for governor in which is an open, I think it's an open race, I believe
it's open,
In
and
Alaska.
apparently there's a pretty good chance that she would have a trifecta if she runs for governor.
Right. So I guess that she'd have a better chance of winning if she ran for governor, but she's probably she's almost certainly the only Democrat who could win a Senate seat against incumbent Dan Sullivan, and so apparently, I guess Chuck Schumer, who by the way deserves so much credit for the job he's done in recruiting candidates this cycle. I mean, he's recruited great candidates for every single race, basically. North Carolina, Roy Cooper, Janet Mills in Maine, Sherrod Brown in Ohio, and now Patola in Alaska. So he got her to run. Well, supposedly it's not definite. She hasn't announced yet, but it seems likely she's going to run. This creates a real possibility for Democrats to win the Alaska Senate seat, which means that as much as I don't think it's, I'd be skeptical about this. Democratic control of the Senate is on the table. I think it's a 15 to 20% chance, although Patola probably increases that margin somewhat, maybe 25% of happening. But if you look at North Carolina and Maine, if you win those two seats, you need to win two more. You got good candidates in Ohio. You got a good candidate now in Alaska. You got a possibility in Iowa, Texas. If Paxton's the nominee, maybe. I still don't see it happening. But look, my whole thing in this is you want to win the Senate back in 28. And so you need to make it a dent into Republican control. So if you can win, say, three seats, make it 50-50, you got a real good chance of winning the Senate back in 2028.
I would put about 25% chance in 26. That may go up as the year progresses. But in every single race where Chuck Schumer had a dream candidate, Ohio, Alaska, North Carolina, he seems to have gotten that person. In the places where he didn't, there really wasn't that person because Democrats had no bench. And honestly, he's been so good that I still expect him to get one of those Southern governor types to run a kamikaze mission to divert money, um, in some state that they're not going to win, but makes it look mildly competitive. He's just a really good recruiter. He's a really good fundraiser. I think he's taken a lot of unfair shit from people who are expecting the Senate leader to be something the Senate leader isn't supposed to be. And he's just very good at the core job, which is build a majority and fundraise for a majority. And I think that, that to me, this is all math, right? Every seat that you make competitive here lowers the percentage of the seats that you have to win to get the majority. It's, before, if Alaska's not competitive, you need to win 4 out of 5 competitive states. That's 80%. If Alaska's competitive, now you're down to 66%. It's a little bit of a better chance. And the other thing that I think is true is I think we are getting closer and closer to like a 50% chance of Democrats getting to a 50-50 Senate, which,
Hmm,
we
that's
don't
interesting.
talk about this enough. But Bob Casey Jr. losing the Senate seat by like 15,000 votes in Pennsylvania is the reason we got the big, beautiful bill. That extra vote made it a lot easier for Republicans to get their agenda through. It's how we got Pete Hegseth. You know,
Maybe.
there are all of these consequences to every single vote in the Senate. And if you get down to a 50-50 Senate, now all you need is Lisa Murkowski on anything um
Yeah.
to stop it. And so I do think that, yes, it's about 2028. The other thing, and I hate, I feel bad saying this kind of thing, but we just saw it yesterday. Doug LaMonfa, a 65-year-old congressman from Northern California, dropped dead. Okay. You
Yeah.
get to a
Very
50-50
tragic.
Senate, it's tragic. I'm not rooting for this. I will never reach the day where I care about politics to such a point as to risk people dead. I think it's bad for your soul. But anyway, you put yourself at 50-50. It's happened before, where seats flip because somebody passes away. And so it's a possibility. And I think that those odds are going up. The other thing is, if the wave grows, those odds go up. And I do think that we're seeing a situation in which Trump clearly that tweet tells you all you need to know. He doesn't get it. He doesn't
No.
understand how to handle this moment, and it's just going to get worse for them.
By the way, on the Lamothe thing, so last March, Sylvester Turner, who's congressman from Democratic Congress in Texas, died.
Freshman
Greg Abbott,
congressman,
yeah,
for Houston.
newly elected,
Yeah.
uh, he died, and the governor of Texas, Greg Abbott, held open the special election for like a year. It's happening, I think, in March.
No,
Uh,
no, it's we're finally going to get a congressman January
oh,
31st, I
sorry,
think.
January.
Yeah,
Okay, let's see.
he
10 months, 10 months. And
it's
it'll be a
been
Democrat because it's a heavily Democratic seat. So if I'm Gavin Newsom, I basically am leaving that seat open until the election in November. I don't see any reason whatsoever to have an election. And because first of all, just for we're clear, the district, if there was an election, special election, the district would be under the old rules in California, not the new ones that are going into effect for the election in November. So you're electing somebody who's basically representing a district that's going to disappear in November. I don't know anybody even wants to win. I mean, even if you're a Republican, I guess you can win. I guess you want to win because then you could get a congressional pension. But basically, you'd have the job for 8 months and with no hope whatsoever of holding the seat. So
you're not even going to get it for that long. They're
yeah,
people
you're
seem
right.
to think that Newsom's going to schedule a primary for June and a general election to coincide with the election in November. I don't know where that is, but this actually raises a point that I have a bone to pick with New Jersey Democrats. And admittedly, I don't know the laws intricately, but Marjorie Taylor Greene resigned yesterday. Brian Kemp, the governor of Georgia, set the special election to replace her for March 10th.
Uh-huh.
Mikey Sherrill resigned in November. We knew she was going to be governor from the first week of November. New Jersey Democrats are not holding the special election until April. They are artificially deflating the number of Democrats in Congress and the ability to stop things and to
Yeah,
maybe,
that's stupid.
things. And it's just a stupid, unforced error. This is usually Michael's point, but I'm going to pick up on it. Democrats have to start playing hardball.
Yeah,
Democrats have to understand that Greg Abbott is going to hold Sylvester Turner's seat open from the day after the State of the Union until the end of January the following year. It was disgraceful. It was deplorable. But if they're going to do that, then you do the same thing. You set
yeah,
the
I know.
date for the last possible date that you can replace these people. And look, I wish we had a process where you replace anybody who died in 90 days, every state of the union. Okay, that's better for democracy to have people represented. But if that's not the system, then you operate within the rules that you have and you pursue maximum advantage because
N-
they will.
Newsom should not hold this election. He should just say we're going to have it in November. That's what he should do.
I
I don't know if he
believe that
will. That's what he
there's
should do.
a statute. Somebody said, I think it was like 140. He has to call an election within 140 days. So I don't, if that's a primary, that would be he could call for summer and then the generals, however long after that. So like he
But
could basically run the clock out.
it's a different district. It's going to be a different district. It's
Right,
like
right, right.
so I don't even know how that would work, to be honest. Anyway,
It's
look,
they do this. Well, it's actually what's happening in Texas, right? It's the same thing. The district changed, but they're having it's the old district that they're going to have the special election in.
yeah, but I think that district would still going to be a mostly Democratic district in a new line,
Right.
I
It's still going
believe.
to be a mostly Democratic district. It's just going to be a different district. I mean,
Lamoffa's district is going to go from Republican district to a safe Democratic
yeah,
district.
they completely carved it up in North. It's like one of those
Yes.
little. It looks like an Etch a Sketch line now. Um, but yeah, we have to play by the same rules they're playing by. And Trump announced this that he had died, and also announced that Jim Baird, an 80-year-old congressman from Indiana, Republican, was in a serious car accident. He got out of the hospital yesterday, but he's in a cervical collar and stuff. So basically, this stuff matters in that the Republicans' operational majority is decreasing. Um,
They have two votes, and with Massey basically voting against them on everything, it's like down to like
two.
it's two.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, they're having trouble with the rule for right now for the rest of the week and stuff because they just don't have much of a margin. And it wouldn't take much more for that margin to really be compromised. I don't think we're actually going to get to a point where there's ever more Democrats than Republicans, especially because thank you, New Jersey Democrats. But it's not
No, but
impossible for the
It's
first
still
time in like
April.
50 years.
It's still April. I mean,
It's true.
it's look. It's not out of the realm of possibility that Akeem Jeffries could be speaker this year. It's
Right,
not
right,
out.
right.
It's
No, I mean,
unlikely, but it's
look,
possible.
look, just look at it this way. Hal Rogers, the dean of the House, is like 90 years old. Anytime you have members like that, it's not impossible that something could happen to them. That I'm not wishing anything, but that's just basic math,
Yeah, it's
actuarial
true.
tables.
By the way, did you see that
And
when Trump announced Lamoffa, he said about him, the guy voted with me
yeah,
100% of the time.
yeah, because you have to make everything, even a tragic death, about you.
He is a malignant narcissist. He is
Absolutely.
such a malignant narcissist.
I made a
And
joke about this to my girlfriend yesterday because it's just like it's so Trump that he's like, this guy tragically died. He was a great guy. He voted with me 100% of the time. Like that is the only metric
by
for a
the
good
way,
person.
he also said to the Republicans that you have to win the midterm because they're going to impeach me if you don't
That's
win.
right.
It's
He
like
did.
I don't give a fuck if you keep your job, but I don't want to get impeached again.
Well, we're talking about the guy who, and this is another unfortunate story, but she passed away. Mia Love from
Utah.
Utah lost in 2018, and he said that's because you show me no love or something like that. The next day in a press conference, everything is about him. And honestly, Michael's answering his own question from before about Stephen Miller. Stephen Miller has remained in this position of pinnacle power, and they let him go out and say what he wants because he spends every day kissing Trump's ass.
Yeah.
Literally, there is nothing that Trump couldn't do, and that Stephen Miller wouldn't say, yes, sir, that was a
Did
great
you?
idea.
Well, I mean, to that point, like when you watch the press conference on Saturday, like when Trump delivers this incoherent rant about Venezuela, and then Pete Hegseth gets up there and is like, "This is the greatest military action ever," and this is the great. I'm like, do these people have any self-respect at all? I mean, do you know?
No,
I'm sure
no,
behind
none
closed
of
doors,
them
Pete
do.
Hegseth is like says Trump's a fucking idiot, but like literally just
You know what? I will
I'm
get
not gonna.
to
Yeah,
you're teeing up a point that I made for paid subscribers yesterday. I was riffing Jonathan Martin. I don't know if you saw it, did a column over the weekend, a preview column, a multiple choice column of like, all these multiple choice questions and what's the answer for 2026. And I think he got one wrong. He said that Andy Oldham would be the guy who would replace Sam Alito if Sam Alito retired. And I said, that's Trump one. What people still don't seem to grasp is the only currency in Trump two for anything is kissing his ass.
yeah.
He has figured out the first time around that you just, hey, I don't want somebody who's going to say no to me or who's going to slow walk this thing I want done because it's batshit insane. And what he's done is he's surrounded himself with the worst ass licking, pathetic, no self respect people, from Pam Bondi to Pete Hegseth to Bobby Kennedy, telling him what a great president he is. I mean, it's pathetic. And honestly, like, I think there's only one guy who he would consider for the Supreme Court, Emil Bove, the judge who he put
Oh no,
on
I was thinking that what's her name? The woman down in Florida who
her too,
proceeded. Eileen Cannon,
um,
thank you.
Eileen Cannon, or Bondi. It would be, it's going to be someone who's going to really test Republicans' ability or willingness to confirm just about anyone, because it's going to be an ass licker.
By the
That
way,
is
do
the
you
only.
remember? Speaking of, do you remember when George Bush nominated what's her name? Harriet Miers to the Supreme
Myers, yeah.
Court? Wow, that was quite something, wasn't it?
As the apparently, as the story goes, Harry Reid told her that she could, told him that Myers could get confirmed, and he wanted to put a woman on the court. And I just remember, I researching for my book that, they sent Dick Cheney on Rush Limbaugh to try to quiet the waters on the right. And they people talking to her pastor about what she believed. It was just a shit show of
Who
things.
do we get stuck with because he wasn't Harriet Miers?
Alito,
Alita,
Alito. Myers
who's
would have been
that?
better.
Well, yeah, she would have.
I mean,
So
I
one
mean, the
of the
bar for better than Sam Alito is
Sam
so.
Alito is not only the worst
He's
justice,
the
he's the most
worst.
partisan justice. He's a terrible justice.
In
I
fact,
mean,
I got a Michael, I got a PR email yesterday for, literally, I could not think of a book I want to read less than a Molly Hemingway book on Sam Alito.
oh my
Uh,
God.
I was just like, I might burn this. It might be worth.
That's the only usefulness that it would serve. By the way, one of the commentators points out that when I think it's Alcee Hastings died,
Yeah,
that DeSantis didn't schedule a special election for 10 months, but
right.
when Waltz and Gates resigned, special
Yeah,
elections were held,
that
I
that
think like a
that
couple months later.
unfortunately how it's done. And I
That's
mean,
what, if you want my honest opinion, that's what Newsom should do if he can.
right.
All right, so let's just start back to the Senate really quick here. I think uh, this is going to be an interesting thing to follow over the next several months. To see, we have to see some polling on this. This is the problem too. I haven't seen any good polling in Ohio. I haven't seen any good polling I haven't seen any polling on the Platinum Mills race in forever. I haven't seen good polling in North Carolina. Like, we need to see some polling to see actually if these
I
races are really close, and also see
I I
who's raising money.
well, I'd like to see polling, but I'm just gonna say that I actually applaud media outlets for not trying to do polling at this juncture, because I think it's a waste of their revenue at a time that a lot of these local outlets
Fair.
especially don't have, that they're cutting reporters. And frankly, I don't think polling in January means that much. People like Michael and I want it, and I would like to see it. But we the last poll I saw in Ohio had Brown ahead. But here's the thing with Ohio polling. I'll give you all advice when watching the Ohio race. The number to watch is not who is ahead in Ohio. It's, does Sherrod Brown get above 47? We have seen now three very strong candidates over four election cycles in Ohio. Rich Cordry in 2018, the governor's race, Tim Ryan in the 2022 Senate race, and Brown in the 24 Senate race get to like 47%. And the reason that sticks out to me is last cycle Brown led a lot of the polling, but it was all like 47, 45. And what
Yeah,
ends up happening is that small little undecided population ends up going to the challenger, because in Ohio, I have some doubt as to whether 50 plus one is still out there for a Democrat,
yeah.
whether
I
they're sealing. Brown was the only one, Brown in 2018 is the only one since Obama and Brown in 2012 who has crested 50%.
yeah.
Okay. So that race, there's some real doubt. I haven't seen anything in North Carolina. I haven't seen anything in Maine, and I don't think I've seen anything in Alaska at all. And there's only like one
I mean,
guy
it's
who
a little
knows how to
hard
poll
because
Alaska.
you haven't had we haven't had a primary yet, but
Right.
we'll get there. We'll get there. But I think, I
We'll
guess,
we'll get there
to
on that stuff.
put a bow on this, I think both of us agree that Peltola in the race. I think your point before was really spot on. That it just increases the number of viable seats for Democrats. Doesn't mean they're going to win them, but it increases the number.
Right.
So, if you've got four long shots, not long shots, four some what's up between a long shot and a neck and neck, somewhere like slight
They're
chance,
competitive.
competitive.
They're
Thank you,
competitive
competitive.
races.
Apparently,
These are
I forgot.
races, you
Yes,
know,
yes,
if we were a ratings agency, Michael and I would probably call them lean Republican.
yeah,
They are things where things need to go right for Democrats. They're things where if the election was tomorrow, they might not be wins, but they are competitive races, and you never know what's going to happen.
yeah.
And I always go back to 2006. This point in 2006, nobody thought George Allen was losing. They thought George Allen was the front runner for the 2008 Republican nomination
Do
at
you
this
remember what
point.
happened? The word
Yeah, he called the tracker a macaca, quote
macaca,
unquote.
macaca.
And I'm pretty sure that a lot of people had not heard of the term until the day before, and that ended George Allen's political career.
Well, I mean,
Um,
come on, it was a bad cycle. Jim Lowe was a good candidate. I don't think it was just
right,
the
right,
macaca
right,
thing,
right.
but it didn't help him.
But remember that we're talking about a state in Virginia, and this is why I always hesitate to make categorical statements. We're talking about a state in Virginia that hadn't voted for a Democrat for
Yeah,
president at that point since Lyndon Johnson, where Chuck Robb, the incumbent senator, had lost in 2000, was the reason Democrats didn't have a majority in the Senate in 2000, because the Democratic incumbent senator had lost. It was not a state that people looked at and said, "Oh, it's a red state." Okay, they can win the governorship, but that's it. They can't win, federal races, and it wasn't one that people thought was competitive
yeah,
9, 10 months out. And so you just watch how these cycles develop. Another race, and they ended up not winning it. But 2016 Missouri, Jason Kander ended up being a great candidate. Roy Blunt ended up being asleep at the wheel, and it ended up being a 3-point race, and it only was won because Trump won Missouri by so much more than
right,
Romney had in
right.
2012. So, you just never know with this. I think there's less of the like breakout superstar candidate thing that you used to see because we're so polarized. But having competitive races is a good thing. And it opens the door for possibilities. And Michael mentioned fundraising. One interesting point, or data moment is coming over the next week. We're going to get fourth quarter fundraising numbers. And
Yeah,
that's going to be important because it's first of all, it's going to tell us if someone's leaning towards retiring, they tend to have bad fundraising numbers. But secondly, it's going to tell us, James Tallarico in Texas raised, I think, 6 million after 7 million last quarter. He had a pretty good quarter. He announced his number. Graham Plattner, Michael and I think is a disaster, but he raised $5 million, which is a credible, amount for a Senate campaign. We don't know what Janet Mills's number is going to be, but like these are important data points to watch. And my prediction on this is you're going to see big numbers from Democrats. That a lot of the enthusiasm that was missing early in the year, there had
yeah,
been this juggernaut in 2018, 2020, even 22, 24 of small dollar donations flooding to Democrats and Democrats having more money. That
yep.
hadn't been the case for most of last year. I think you're going to see that pattern come back because after the wins in Virginia and New Jersey, it energized Democrats. It energized people to say, "Hey, this is possible. Let's donate. Let's get involved." And I think you're going to see huge fundraising numbers over the next week for Democrats.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, we'll see, but that's obviously a huge factor. Look, I think I mean, to just sort of sum this up, I think you and I of the view that Democrats are heavily favored to win the House. It's kind of hard to imagine a scenario in which they don't. And in the Senate, chances are more than 50%, well more than 50% that Republicans control the Senate. But I think, you're dealing with an election that is going to favor an environment that's going to favor Democrats, that does favor Democrats, in which Democrats have the momentum and the enthusiasm. He's an unpopular incumbent. You combine that with historically how first midterms go, and generally the incumbent party loses. Uh, the Senate's in play. I don't think I still don't. I'm still not convinced. Democrats have not shown an ability to win in red states like Alaska and look, Patola did win she did win a statewide race in Patola, in
Twice,
Alaska
twice.
twice. Although,
And she outran Harris by like 15. No, it wasn't. She outran Harris by like 10 points last
yeah.
cycle.
So
So
yeah, I mean, so she's got a more of a track record than say, and look, Sherrod Brown has won too, but that was, he hasn't won a race there since
Since
2018, and
2018.
it's a long time ago in politics, I hate to say. So my sense of this is that it's a long shot. And, that, by the way, if Plattner's the nominee in Maine, I'm not convinced he can beat Susan Collins. I mean, I think we think John Ossoff is safe in Georgia, but, we'll see. We think Roy Cooper's safe in North Carolina. Not safe, but likely
I
to win North Carolina, but we'll see.
I
So
I
it's
think
all.
Republicans are smoking something in Michigan, thinking it's competitive in the election cycle that we've got coming.
By the way,
Um,
Michigan is. Can I mention really quick because
sure.
Schumer hasn't really. I think he encouraged Haley Stevens to run. Um, Although he's not like publicly put his thumb on the scale the way he did with like Totola and Brown and some other folks. But I get the impression that Democrats are not excited about Haley Stevens, and I do think. Look, there's three candidates in that race. There's Stevens, there's McMorrow, and then there's the
Al
other guy's name,
Sayed, is it?
El Sayed. That's right. They don't
Abdul Al
want
Sayed, I think.
Right. He's a Bernie guy. They don't want him to be the nominee. McMorrow is pretty liberal, but she could probably win that race. Actually, it's a good
She's
environment for Democrats.
she's charismatic. I like her a lot. She's charismatic. She is an average person. I hate to phrase it that way, but she's out there having beers with voters. She's, cares
Can
about
I tell you about
sports.
that? I had
Yeah.
beers with her husband. Actually, very
Ray
nice guy.
Word. Yeah. Yeah.
At
Yeah.
a University of Michigan. What's it called? Tailgate. Nice guy.
Yeah. Yeah,
But
I
look,
mean,
yeah. But the
like
bottom line is this: yeah, she can win that race. I think. But the point is, I think that they favored Steven. Thought she was the best candidate. I don't know that that's still the case.
Stevens is an interesting candidate because she did win a hard House race, flip a seat in 2018, but she just seems to have no charisma.
Yeah, that
Um,
does seem to be the problem.
and she's flat on the stump. Like she's perfectly inoffensive. She's got no disqualifying positions. She's relatively young. Like I get on paper that she's a pretty good candidate, but she just doesn't seem to have any charisma or any
No,
ability to
but I don't
get
know that
people excited. She
I don't know
doesn't
that.
need it if she's the
That's what
candidate.
about to say that. I don't know that it
Yeah,
matters in this environment. By the way, Michigan is interesting because you do have two House races up for grabs. One, John James's seat. He's running for governor. That
actually,
one looks a good chance for Democrats to pick up that seat. And there's another one, Tom Barrett's seat, which I think is the Alyssa Slotkin's old seat,
I
is also
actually
up for
think there's
grabs.
three. There's three. Bill Huizenga out in Western Michigan. Um,
That's a wave that happens in a wave election.
that's a way, but that's a seat that's moving towards Democrats. That
Yeah,
is
that's fair. That's fair.
paradigmatic wave seats. Actually, there have been two of them that people have been talking about all cycle. There's that one, and then there's Rob Whitman's seat, which is not going to exist in a few months when Virginia Democrats get done gerrymandering. But what you're looking for in waves is often seats that are moving away from the president's party, and those moves accelerate dramatically in a wave is what ends up happening, and tend to see flips. But Huizenga's seat is competitive; it's in play. They have a good candidate there, so Michigan's important for that reason. With three House seats, the only other state with like more is Pennsylvania, that where there's four,
Yeah.
but everywhere else, Iowa, there's maybe three. Iowa's two and a half ish, but there's a lot of places that Democrats can win. And by the way, this is one reason that we still hear people out there saying, "Oh, Trump's not going to allow the election to happen." There are enough seats for Democrats to win the House in blue states controlled by blue governors, by Democrat governors.
However,
Uh,
can I make one interjection
sure.
point here? Apparently, the Supreme Court's going to announce some decisions on Friday. Could be nothing. Could be a small thing. Could be the tariff decision, or could be the Voting Rights Act. You don't know.
Yeah, but Louisiana even announced this week that they're going to go with the old map for this cycle. It's gotten late enough that I don't think a lot of places will remap or can remap.
Mm,
They'll try, but I actually
not
I would
so
not expect
sure.
that decision this week. Typically, deeply contested decisions don't come down in the middle of the term
This
like
is the
that.
most partisan Supreme Court in
It
my
is.
lifetime, and if they want to put the finger on the scale to help Republicans, they will do it.
I agree with that, but with one caveat. The Chief Justice, who cares more about optics than the other justices, is the one who kind of controls when decisions get released. And I
Maybe
think he knows that he can hand Republicans their big victory. And if he waits a couple of months, it won't look as partisan because it won't happen this cycle.
that
Uh,
has been my assumption as well, that they would wait to eviscerate the VRA for so it won't look so partisan for 2028.
right.
However,
You
I don't
never
know.
know.
You
And I
never
mean,
know.
there's other things that they're going to have a mail ballot case that there is going to come down on receiving mail ballots, and that will affect this new post office rule about when things get postmarked and stuff will play a factor. So, definitely, I, I I wouldn't put anything beyond the court. I tend not to think that that's what's coming on Friday. And I think
I
we're sort
agree.
of at the end stage of when it could come down where states could reasonably try to redo their map.
I think it's more likely to be the tariff decision, or maybe it's
Yeah.
something that we hadn't. That's a smaller case. But
Yeah. A lot of times the early decisions are the cases that nobody cares about, that
yeah,
are small, mundane things that are 9-0 decisions. Basically, the more the people are writing, the longer it takes, which is why the big cases get pushed off to
yes,
the end of the term. They're exchanging drafts, they're responding to each other. They're trying to shore up majorities. There's all that kind of like internal court politics going on. But by the way, what one point that builds off that I am not one to praise Elizabeth Warren very often, but she gave a significant sum of money to state parties for state House and Senate elections yesterday or today. And it's a very wise move because, one thing we don't talk about enough when we talk about the midterms is what's going to shape that 2028 House playing field is how the midterms go at the state level. Do Democrats get a trifecta in Minnesota? Do they get one in Wisconsin? Do they win the governorship of Georgia? Please nominate Jeff Duncan, Democrats, the former Republican lieutenant governor, because he can win. Why do I care about that? Well, because then they can overturn the Voting Rights Act all they want. You have a Democrat to veto a gerrymander in Georgia.
yeah, but
Those are
not in
the kinds of
Alabama,
things.
and not
Right,
in
right, right,
Florida,
right, right.
and not
Like
in
Louisiana,
Louisiana.
Florida, Alabama, South Carolina, those places are done for. Although I
Yeah,
do think South Carolina, you could risk a dummy mander if because of Charleston growing eventually. But realistically speaking, it's going to hurt. But like if you can take Georgia off the map and then Washington State, if they get they need 2/3 in Washington State. If they get 2/3, they can gerrymander Washington State and they can gerrymander Colorado. Like there are ways you offset this if you have the right midterm. But which is to say that Michael and I talked to you about the House, we talked to you about the Senate, but the midterms waves happen down ballot too.
yep,
And I actually think Democrats will end up picking up 3 or 4 governorships, which is helpful. But those state house and state senate races that don't get a lot of attention, those things matter. There was a special election last night in the Charleston suburbs in a Trump plus 7.5 district that the Democrat lost by 21 votes, I think it
yeah. It's
was.
actually weird. Only a 7 point improvement over Harris, which is not great.
Actually, the average last night in all the special elections was only 6.5 points of an
Yeah, that's weird,
overperformance.
right?
It was weird. And I was trying to figure out if it was because it was the first Tuesday of the new year and it was after the holidays,
Should
or
have favored
whether,
Democrats then. Should have been even better for
yeah,
Democrats.
or whether it was just a something to do with the Venezuela thing. Like I was spending a while last night thinking, like, why was this uniformly across the board so much worse for Democrats than other special election nights? And I couldn't quite figure it out. Now the good news is it was still 6.5 or points across the board. It was
Six or
still
seven points. Six
yeah.
or 7 points.
They have to tee you up. That's why, Michael. They have to tee you up
Thank
every
you.
week
Thank you.
for that. But yeah, like 21 votes. That's the kind of thing that swings these state house races. So if you're looking for something to get involved in or to care about, state house and state senate races, even in Pennsylvania, it's not impossible that Josh Shapiro gets a trifecta.
No, not impossible. But I will say this: it's probably it might be nothing, but Democrats have been winning by 13 or 14 points, generally
I
speaking, and to
agree.
win by 6 or 7, yeah, I mean, we'll see if it happens again in the next
I
special
I had the
election.
same I had the same thought last night of, hey, these numbers are not as good as they should
No, they're
be.
not as good. They're not as good.
And you just never know about the demographics of the district, who the candidates were. I
Yeah,
don't
but it
think it's
wasn't just.
anything to worry.
Yeah,
Right,
I
right, right.
mean, if it happens again, then I think there's some reason for
I
concern for
mean,
Democrats.
we'll watch next week. There are 4 races across the board to watch, but it's certainly something to keep your eye on. Does that number that has been about 11 creep down towards 7? because realistically, that would put the Senate out of play.
Well,
And that
no,
would
no, 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 no. I don't believe that. I mean, it depends on the candidates. Depends on the.
okay. Let me rephrase that in a more factually accurate way. If the national swing is 7 points, and we're talking about states that Trump
Yeah.
won by 13,
Yeah.
you're now needing a candidate who is capable of overperforming the national environment by 6 points. That is a heavier lift than if the national swing is like 10 points and you need somebody to overperform by 3 points.
For what it's worth, both Patola and Sherrod Brown have done that.
Right, right, right. I mean, look, I can sit here if we wanted to be optimists, and that's hard for me as a Philadelphia sports fan and Democrat. I've spent my whole life being pessimistic.
Sure.
But if we wanted to be optimists, I could absolutely paint you the scenario of Democrats win Maine, North Carolina, Ohio, Alaska, get to 51 because Mary Peltola and Sherrod Brown dramatically outperform the national environment. They've done it before. They're strong candidates. It'll be a good environment. Like I can certainly paint that scenario, and then Iowa and Texas don't even matter.
Yeah.
They would be gravy at that point. So there is definitely a scenario. That's why I say it's at least a 25% chance at this point, because there is a scenario in which candidates with a track record can deliver the Senate now, and that was not true before it seemed like Platola was going to run.
Yeah. That's fair. That's fair. I still think it's gonna happen. I don't think it's gonna happen, but it's.
I don't think it's going to happen. Now, I will say, even if it doesn't happen, one thing that we don't talk about enough is in 2018, you saw a wave in governor's races and in House races, and Republicans gained seats because of the map in the Senate. This is not that cycle. This is the map where, in a wave, I think Democrats, as long as they don't nominate Graham Platner, are going to pick up 2 seats. I think that they are
They
pretty
have to pick up
likely.
at least 2 seats.
Right, right, right. But they're going to make gains. And as I said, I do think margin matters. We've got because the parties are as polarized as they are. I think this is something the media missed at the beginning of last year. 53 Senate seats is now is a really strong majority because of how polarized we are.
Yeah, it
It
is.
becomes a
It's a
lot
good number.
harder
Excuse me.
it
Good number.
we saw that on the Hexit vote. We saw it on the reconciliation bill. We've seen it for most of the year. It's just very hard. The rescissions bill that killed the Corporation for Public Broadcasting that folded this week. Like we've seen it over and over and over again. It's just very, very, very hard to peel off 4 Republican senators in a very ideologically cohesive Trumpy caucus. If you get that number down where you only need 2, it's a much easier ask realistically.
Agree.
And that does matter. And we focus a lot on the Senate because realistically, winning the House can stop a lot of legislative things. Winning the House by itself cannot do 2 very crucial things. One, all of a sudden the Senate becomes a judge confirmation factory. Because that's all they can do, and that's what the Republican leadership focus on. And two, if you have a Democratic House and a Democratic Senate, you can put things on Trump's desk that, first of all, create a perfect situation. And the perfect situation is either he vetoes popular things or he signs them and infuriates his own party because he proves that he's not a fiscal conservative. And you end up getting things that liberals have wanted for a long time because you play to his ego and play to his populism.
Yeah, maybe.
And
I don't
either
know.
way, it's a win for Democrats.
Look, can I just sum this up quickly because we got to finish up pretty soon here. I got to jump off. I have another thing I have to do, but I want to just say
You
this.
could talk with Mike. We don't want to keep Mike Pesca waiting. Mike's a good
I
guy.
gotta get lunch before that. That's the thing. So here's the thing. Donald Trump is very unpopular. Republican Party is not popular. Congress is not popular. Democrats have a lot of momentum, a lot of enthusiasm. They've got good candidates. They should do well. And I just think that, you know, the larger structural issues that have brought us to the point where we say we think Democrats are going to win the House and competitive in the Senate are just not going to change that much this year. And if anything, I think Trump's going to get worse. And so we'll see what happens. As I think what it comes down to, we need to see some of the. Well, here's a different way. The dynamics of this race of the midterms are pretty clear based on the national situation, which is an unpopular incumbent president and a midterm election. what really will come down to this year is candidate quality and how what kind of campaigns people are running. I think the starting point for this election is that Democrats are favored, and it's I think a question of how well they do depends a lot on again on dynamics of candidates and of these races, and that's why getting someone like Patola, who's a strong candidate who has already won statewide in Alaska, is such a big get for Democrats because it will give them a chance. It gives them a reasonable chance to win that seat versus pretty much any other candidate. Um, but a lot of how this goes, we're going to have to wait and see. But in but back to the original point, I think Trump's unpopularity is really the defining issue of American politics right now. And we can talk about Venezuela, all the other issues. They're kind of secondary to that point. And I've seen nothing I've seen from him makes me believe that he is going to um, improve his standing. And, look, announcing he's going to like stop corporations from buying single family homes, like I get that is a
I
sop
think it's a good
to hit,
idea,
I
but I don't
guess,
think they do
but
anything.
I don't think they'll do anything. And I think politically it's a non-starter. I think the bottom line is people are not happy with the state of the economy, the state of the country, and they're not happy
And
with Trump.
the part of that we have to emphasize again is this is a man who thinks it's a good political idea to talk about his affordability agenda at Davos,
And look,
which just
the thing
shows how out
is,
of touch he is.
it's more than that. It's that he's not disciplined enough to be able to focus on an economic message for more than
Correct.
2 seconds. That's the bottom
That
line.
that's right. And by the way, we're now getting video out there of the execution by this ICE officer
Oh
of
God.
this woman, and it's pretty horrific. And that will probably be the thing that dominates the next few days in the news is people watching this woman, this guy just reach in and shoot this woman. Um,
By the way, this is
and
why you don't let ICE agents who have no experience in doing law enforcement to be armed on the streets of American cities. This was inevitable. This was going to happen. Inevitable.
absolutely. And I would imagine actually that the one policy, immediate policy ramification, you are not going to get a funding bill that funds the Department of Homeland Security. You will not get Democratic votes for that
Maybe.
at this point because
Maybe.
ICE is just out of control and needs to be limited. If this agent is not charged with murder by authorities in Minneapolis, there's something wrong.
Oh, but
This was
if he is, it's a shit show. It's a total
right.
shit show.
Well, I think it's where we're going. I think we're gonna have a shit show here, a federal state power shit show, because ICE is just completely and totally out of control.
But I
Because
think, yeah, go ahead.
it's Stephen Miller, it's Kristi Noem. Not unlike the first term DHS people who actually cared about the law, she just cares about pleasing Donald Trump.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just bad. ICE is just awful.
Yeah, it's bad. But again, I think they're so wedded to this particular policy of domestic deportation that they're not able to pivot in any way, and they're going to double down on anything that happens here. So
Right,
it's
but
just,
these videos are doing damage to Donald Trump's popularity
oh
on
no,
top
no
of the
question about it.
economy.
Especially among
You know,
Hispanic voters. There's no question about it. I
especially among Hispanic. I mean, hell, there was even apparently rumblings that the problems the New York Mets had were political debates in their clubhouse.
Are you serious? Oh
Of
yeah,
a,
right.
yeah,
But who was it that was it Soto was anti-Trump or something? And no,
yeah, I
yeah,
don't know. I just heard about this yesterday for the first time, but like it wouldn't surprise me when a franchise whose two biggest stars are not white,
yeah,
and they jettisoned a lot of white guys, so who are probably Trumpy. But
yeah,
it is ICE is incredibly divisive, and the thing that people have to remember is this is the kind of video that leads the local news, and that people see over and over again, and that most Americans recoil from. They said that could have been me
yes,
driving down the street,
exactly.
having some guy running at me, scaring me, so I try to get away, and then he just shoots me.
By
Like,
the way, we didn't we talked at all about January 6th there, but I mean that also is just the thing yesterday with Trump putting out the this ridiculous alternate timeline on it's just you know I, I I I think this is something else that just really does piss people off. I mean, people who care. I think it's one more example of like why they don't like Trump. I don't see how it is how it's a positive for him.
no,
Holy shit! Oh my
no.
god! Oh my
What
god!
did
I
you
just
just
saw
see
the
the
video
video?
too.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. It's just absolutely horrific.
Oh my god!
Um.
He just shot somebody who's driving away.
Right.
Oh
There's
god!
abs. I
This is an
mean,
awful,
they have
awful
to
piece of
charge this
video.
guy. Yeah, I mean,
Wow.
and this is look, I understand we're a different society than 92 and Rodney King, but it's the kind of video that shocks like that, that is
Wow.
just such a blatant abuse of power in a horrific way, or the Derek Chauvin George Floyd video. It's the kind of thing that like should spur action. Um,
It
and
won't, but it won't.
it won't, but again, all it takes is a couple of points. If it offends 5% of people who voted for Trump, knocks them away from the coalition, you're just chipping away at that.
Yeah.
And it's death by a thousand cuts at this point with different pieces. And the economy is the biggest one. But each of these things slowly chip away. And yeah, that's a good point about uh, ICE and the January 6th defendants having jobs. All these campaigns of just bringing in random people, ICE agents. These people are clearly untrained. They're clearly unqualified. They should not be on the streets of American cities at all.
Wow.
And Democrats absolutely should put a rider in bills as soon as they can. As soon as they have the power to do that, they should do it because ICE is out of control.
You will get no disagreement from me. And again, as you said earlier, I do think that this has become a real problem for for Trump. And I mean, I think among Hispanic voters, and I think among um, uh, young people. I think it's
Well,
just been
the mayor of Minneapolis has summed things up quite nicely. To ICE, get the fuck out of Minneapolis. That's a direct quote from the mayor at a press conference right now.
yeah,
And and again, the people that I always watch on ICE stuff is the South Florida Republican Congress people because they have a much better finger on the pulse of the Hispanic community, and they've pushed back much more than other Republicans on this topic.
right.
So it's just something to watch.
Yeah, we will see. All right, listen,
Mm,
I got to finish up here. I
Yep.
got to go.
Go eat
So
lunch.
I got to eat lunch. I'm
Yeah.
starving, and you can see I'm struggling. I need some coffee too. It's been a long week already.
It's been a
So
long year already. We
it's
we,
been a
we
long
made it
year already.
7 days, and
It,
Donald Trump is tiring us out.
I was going to start off today by just saying like our politics are just a complete and utter shit show. I mean,
They are.
the very fact that the President of the United States is putting out this propaganda bullshit, just Orwellian lies about January 6th, and that Republicans you know, uh, are parroting it's just, including members of Congress whose lives were put at risk by the January 6th insurrection. It is just horrific. It is just horrific, and I just think we are at look. I think the country will survive, but it's been 6 days of this year, and it's already been or 7 days. It's already been a complete shit show.
And
It's
look,
just a terrible situation.
I think that the breaking point for America, the or demarcation point, because we will survive, okay, is January 6th and COVID. Those are things that in the past, every American would have agreed that January 6th was wrong. It was bad. It was criminal. It was
Yes,
those people belonged in jail and belonged in jail for a long time. And everybody would have agreed that COVID was a serious problem. We should do what it takes to minimize deaths. And we frankly would have had a 9/11 style commission afterwards to figure out what worked, what didn't work, and to prepare us for the next pandemic. Okay.
right.
And the fact that neither of those things happened was a sign that we live in a world where people are delusional, frankly. You have a bunch of people who are out there still spinning lies, including, the president of the United States, and then we put him back in office. So the signal was that the
Look, the
January 6th
tragedy of
didn't matter.
January 6th is that we put the guy who was responsible for it. He won a free and fair election. That's the tragedy.
Yeah.
Just no other
I
way
mean,
around it.
the
And that
signal
was a
was
choice
that
that
people
Americans
didn't care
made.
about that. It was a terrible choice. It was a dangerous choice. It was a stupid choice, but it was the choice that the American voters made.
Yep. And on that note,
Not a positive note to end on, but we promise next week we'll have some better news. We hope. Maybe.
look, all I'll say is that that one resolution for January for 2026 was to get better at pickleball, and I played really well last night, so I'm feeling very good about that. Thank you.
We'll clap for you know we'll clap for you. I had a good health doctor's appointment yesterday, so
Hey, there
there's
you
some
go.
positive news.
There you go.
Good blood work out there.
We got years more of Rosenwald. That's a good thing. We want that.
We
We want
hope.
that. We hope.
But tune in next week, Tuesday. Reminder, we'll be on Tuesday
Tuesday,
next week.
and we've been trying to get a special guest on, but both of us have been kind of busy, and we always sort of put off to the last minute, and then people are busy. We tried to get someone on to talk about Venezuela today, but
Well,
everyone was busy.
it's
So,
also an issue of in the Trump news cycle, we can never really predict what the topic that we need a guest on is going to be. And so we end up having to scramble last minute and people are busy. But we
well,
are going to have guests on as the year unfolds.
yeah,
I have
please,
several emails out there to people.
give us your suggestions, people you'd like us to have on, topics you want us to discuss. And as always, if you haven't subscribed to The World According to Brian, do so. If you haven't subscribed to Truth and Consequences, please do so as well. Brian, always a pleasure. Happy New Year. Oh, by the
Pleasure.
way, today is the last day that you can wish somebody Happy New Year, according to Larry David. And he is correct, as always. So today is your last day. Get in while you can, because tomorrow you can't do it anymore. Sorry.
Yeah.
Those them are the rules. All right.
All right. Take care,
Thanks,
everyone. See you next
everybody.
Tuesday.
We'll see you next week. Bye bye.
Bye.